We love shooting, hunting, and educating. So if you want to learn about long-range shooting, you're in the right place. This is the Long Range Addicts Podcast. Shooter ready, stand by.
Hey everybody, it's Cole. I took a couple weeks off. I recorded a whole bunch of episodes. Let them play out. The editors are putting them out. We're trying to get caught up because there's actually a couple of them I wanted to come out a lot sooner than they have. It's just been crazy, and I don't want to put out more than like 1 or 2 episodes a week, but we've been working really hard to get some solid content out there. So we appreciate you. And of course, you probably heard the intro. It still says Long Range Addicts Podcast. Just for you listening that didn't realize it, we've kind of rebranded, redone everything, and linked it with my other business, which is the Long Range Tactics. So now the podcast is called Long Range Tactics Podcast. That way I can focus on the podcast and the education and that part of it at the same time. So just so everybody knows when you're listening here, pretty soon you're going to see all new logos, hear new intros, all that fun stuff, but we just haven't got it done yet. So we're working on it. Of course, I want to thank our great sponsors as always. We've got a bunch of them. And a lot of that is because of you, our great listeners. There's so many of you tuning in, and everybody's kind of seeing that, and we truly appreciate it. Our main sponsor, of course, Primary Arms. They came through the Firearms Radio Network to us. And I honestly didn't know that much about Primary Arms, but as you've probably heard me say in other podcasts, the optics are phenomenal. They also sell other people's optics, and they've kind of turned into a one-stop shop. If you need Glock parts, if you need body armor, if you need anything pretty much shooting, they've got tripods, they've got everything. So if you're looking for something, go check it out. Use the code FRN if you want a free mount. Now, I know there's a new code coming out here in the next week, so pay attention, and I'll try and stick it out there. Of course, Falcor Defense. If you're watching live, you can see my new rock chassis. I just got done with the new Falcor 7. Did it in 6 Creed. I needed another 6mm, like I needed a bullet in the head, but we did it, and we've got it. So now that's my 4th 6mm, and we're going to go shoot it. We're going to see how good it shoots, and maybe we'll go shoot in a couple matches. But the Falcor stuff's phenomenal. They've got a bunch of new hunting stuff coming out. They've got a new hunting stock, and they've got a new hunting action called the MT7 that's coming out. So I'm super excited to see that stuff. Utah Air Guns. Utah Air Guns is one of our newest ones. I'm super freaking excited about it because I've got a new FX Impact coming from Utah Air Guns. We're going to go shoot a whole bunch of stuff with it, compete with it, do a bunch of stuff. And I did RMAC 2 weeks ago. I went in RO just to see kind of how it is, and it's a great sport. The air gun side of it is phenomenal. The amount of money they gave away was absolutely crazy. I think they gave away like $80,000 or something. It was out of control. But I want to thank Utah Air Guns for supporting us, Justin and the team, and super excited about that. We're going to go do some thermal, like pigeon and different hunting at night and in the dairies and stuff, and that's super fun, especially when it's suppressed and you can just shoot all freaking night long. But super excited about that. I'll thank a couple more sponsors as the show goes on, but I want to talk to Laden. I've known Laden for years and years from our Remington days. I mean, that seems like it was a whole lifetime ago. But I want to kind of introduce Laden. I want him to introduce himself. And I mean, he's kind of got one of those been there, done that, all of the things. I was checking out your Facebook profile today. I'm like, you did that? You did that? Really? But a lot of people say that about me. We wear so many different hats. It's crazy. But I wanted to bring you on and kind of talk about that. You got a new show and everything, but introduce yourself to everybody, man.
Yeah, man. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And it's good to spend a little time with you again, actually see your face. As of recent, it seems like we spent so much time catching up with one another on social media. God bless it. And it's allowed us to kind of keep in touch and the occasional email back and forth, but it's good to see you and actually have a conversation with you. So hoping to do that in person again here soon.
Yeah, that's no kidding. It's been a minute since like OSG, I think. It was OSG at Brownells a couple years ago last time I saw you.
That was the last time we caught up, and COVID happened, kind of shut down a lot of stuff that, or opportunities, I guess you'd say, that you and I'd have to interact with one another in person, but that's coming back around now. So I thought I was going to get to see it shot this year, and then my wife tested positive for COVID 2 days before SHOT Show. So,
well, how SHOT is. It's one of those blessings we don't always want to go do.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, it's always the people. That's the best part about SHOT, is getting to see folks and catch up, and it's kind of a rat race otherwise, just early mornings, late nights, and lots of talking in between. So if you're not sick before you get there, you will be by the time you leave, in most cases.
That's no shit. We named it this year. It's the Shovid.
The
So you
Shovid, there you go.
Shovid and about die. Nathan Angel King from Crossbreed Holsters came up with that, and so we just called it Shovid.
That's great. That's great. Well, I guess introduce myself. Just I live here in Northeast Missouri with my wife and our 3 little boys, Stone, Wilder, and Z, and been pretty fortunate to start a career pretty early in the outdoor industry. Coming right out of my undergrad, I actually had an employment opportunity while I was going to school. And my first, I guess it'd been my sophomore year of college, and then kind of stepped away and worked in the family business for a year and a half, and realized, man, my heart, my soul exists in the outdoor industry. And I may not get rich doing it, but I'll live a good life and be fulfilled if I get the opportunity to work in it. So graduated, started out at Remington, where we spent some time together. Was there for about 5 years, working through the sales department. Went from there to Carl Zeiss Sports Optics, where I was a national sales manager for just shy of 3 years. I actually worked with one of our former bosses at Remington, Mike Jensen, and then Todd Pearson, both that were there for a while. And anybody that's spent a little time with me over the years knows that my true passion is bow hunting. And that's kind of the thing that really makes me tick. And so I was called by a recruiter while I was there working at Zeiss, and was offered an opportunity to transition to the Bowtech family of brands and take a national sales manager position there. And so I spent about 3 years there. And then somebody called and said, "Hey, spent some time with you. What are your thoughts on coming over to the Outdoor Sportsman Group and, working more so on the content generation and ad sales management, little business development side of things?" And now I've been here for 6 years. So it happened pretty quick, and it continues to go even faster, it seems like, with each year that passes by. But pretty neat opportunity, and get to spend time with a lot of folks that, I grew up in the industry with, on the manufacturing side of the business. Now I'm helping them generate content about their products and selling them ad plans and schedules with, our different entities, whether it would be North American Whitetail or Gundog or Wildfowl or even Sportsman's channel or the Outdoor channel in some regards. So we've got a pretty large portfolio of brands centered around content generation and content distribution here at Outdoor Sportsman Group, and kind of seems like I'm at home now.
That's the best thing, is it's like everybody knows that this industry, you're not going to become a millionaire, right? It's just not it. But if it's your true passion, it becomes a blast. The only problem is we all know that after a while, it's like your passion turns into work, and you're like, son of a, you know what I mean? It's like, it's one of those things that we're all very blessed to do what we do, though. I was thinking about yesterday. I was just out at the range shooting, and I'm like, man, how many people get paid to come out here and shoot this and then take pictures of it? And it's just a very awesome thing. Now, for you that don't know, OSG's Outdoor Sportsman Group, they have a ton of different publications, and do they have TV shows and stuff now too?
Yeah, publications. So 15 different flagship brands, like Guns and Ammo, In Fisherman, North American Whitetail, Bow Hunter, Peterson's Hunting, Fly Fisherman. A lot of the the mainstream titles that have been around for 40 years in many cases, almost 50 years for some, if not more. And then they also own the Outdoor channel, the Sportsman's channel, and the World Fishing Network, and just recently added the Sportsman's Channel Canada into the mix. They're affiliated. There's some ownership there as well. So yeah, there's a big portfolio. TV shows come with a lot of those brands. So Bow Hunter TV, North American Whitetail TV. Peterson's Hunting is not around anymore on the linear side. They're doing some stuff digitally now, but Guns and Ammo, Handguns and Defense, there's a lot of productions within the portfolio as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy how many different brands is within, and that's kind of the consensus throughout the energy industry.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Vista, you had the Freedom Group,
right?
You had a lot of these things, and I mean, Vista is just one of those gigantic corporations that own everything. Olin Winchester, Browning. I mean, there aren't Browning and Winchester, I think, are the same deal now, right?
On the firearm side, yeah, there's a tie there with, and then with, FN on a larger level. And then, another portfolio would be like Good Sports Marketing or GSM out of Texas. That's a brand now that has, or a portfolio that now has over 50 brands in their portfolio in the hunting and few fishing brands, shooting brands, or industries. So, there's, like you said, there's a lot of that, private equity investing in the opportunity, trying to build out shelf space and leverage the portfolio and build larger, more efficient companies. And so there's definitely some of that in the industry. There's quite a bit of it, I should say, in the industry, not just some these days.
Yeah, and it seems like everybody's kind of starting to finally understand like the evolution, right?
Mm-hmm.
It goes from the good old boys hunting magazine, to more of a branding thing. And I had the Roswillas from Hook and Barrel magazine. If anybody's heard about them, they were on a week ago, and they've been doing a phenomenal job. And they've just kind of taken that whole, the way it used to be to more of a eating, cooking, everyday outdoorsman type thing. And I think that I've seen that trend throughout across the board. There's a couple of them that I think are still stuck in the past, and I hate to say it because they've still got some older editors that don't want to see change. But for the most part, I think a lot of them are kind of going in the right direction, don't you think?
Yeah, for sure. And you just got to think about how content is not only distributed but consumed today. And we have content at our fingertips. 12 hours, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, 52 weeks a year. Every time you turn around, you can pick up, that iPhone right there and say, "Hey Siri, show me, the newest Glock 9." And it's going to show you the newest Glock 9. So, for a lot of these traditional legacy content generation brands or publications, for lack of, any other term, have now had to kind of evolve because if you don't have a digital presence, if you don't have a social presence in today's marketplace, in a lot of cases with the next 2-3 generations, really the future of our industry, they may not be aware of who you are. And that's just the reality of the situation. I think as old of a soul as I am, a guy like myself and a guy like you, where we're kind of in this unique generation where we grew up with the Field and Streams and the Guns and Ammos and the Peterson Huntings or the Bow Hunters laying right on our dad or grandpa's nightstand or, behind the toilet or wherever it might be that they were. We grew up reading those magazines and those were our dream books. But, for anybody that's 10 years younger than you and I or 15 years younger, magazines really weren't a thing, and instead of having a textbook in their classroom, they had a laptop or an iPad or, some type of a device that they were learning on day in and day out. So pretty big transition when you think about it and the way that consumers are being trained, right down to the point of education and how their information and education is being distributed. So, I think a lot of people, to your point, are having to understand, well, how do I evolve from how I was founded? And, if I have any ambitions of continuing this legacy of this brand, then I'm going to have to. So there are a few that are still there and, they may or may not ever come around. But I think, most of us that have business plans to continue down the road with our legacy brands, we're definitely having to learn how to evolve and distribute content and new methods. And there's a learning curve to it. We're learning every day.
Oh yeah. And I mean, it went through dial-up internet, MySpace,
Yeah.
all this stuff. And I remember that was one of my favorite things to do. The store in Fillmore where I grew up, the store's right across the street. And I'd haul ass over there, the first of the month, and I'd find all the magazines I wanted to read and pick them up. And that was our way to get information, and
sure.
Now that's kind of gone by the wayside. I mean, and that's the hard part also. Like for a lot of people listening, that might own a business or something, and all I hear about anymore is, how do I show what I'm making? What are the numbers? What are that thing? And it is so hard to be able to put any numbers out via print because you can say, hey, we sent out this many, but how many people saw your article and your,
right.
And that's kind of the way that the industry has gone. They're like, well, if I don't get any ROI from it, how do I measure my ROI? Right.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the big thing. And I think that's why the online side of it has gotten so big. Now there's still all sorts of people that want to read. But again, it's all about that measurement, right?
It is. Yeah. And it's tough, man, to be honest with you, because the only way to measurement, and a lot of this is based off profit maximization theory, which, was a concept that was taught in business really, at the college level or the postgraduate level from 20 years ago to beyond, and you get a bunch of guys like us that stepped into this industry and they're trying to do more with less. And so it's always number based when you boil it down. And the thing about digital is that you have quick and fast analytics, and, they're pretty accurate. Whereas with print, like you said, the only thing we can lean on really is our subscriber numbers. And then the audits, so a hard third-party audit, rather than just producing something that says, oh, well, I produced 500,000 magazines or copies of this issue and I sent them all out. Okay, well, where did you send them to? The dumpster at McDonald's, or did you send them to a house? So one of the strategies that we practice as an organization is we do third-party audits, subscriber audits, to reassure that we have real subscribers and they're going to real addresses where people are picking up those magazines out of their mailbox or putting them on, the doctor's office counter or the gun shop's counter, wherever it might be. And that helps. But the reality is, if who knows, advertiser X, Y, or Z in the marketplace places a full page ad, and he has kind of an awareness based ad, let's call it, no call to action on it. It's really hard for him to understand how many people he touched and how many people are reacting due to that ad. And, it gets pretty complex if you start breaking down things that you and I used to deal with a lot, like distribution channels, whether they're two-step or direct to consumer. And, it'd be pretty tough to manage when you start to measure with all those different influences.
Yeah. And I've got another new client that I'm talking with, and they don't want to go through, the channels of distributorship and dealers, and they all want to go direct to consumer. And I'm like, that's great, but you've got to understand is all those dealers, all those distributors, all those people are putting out content for you, and they're, putting all that out. With you just doing your own, it's going to be super hard. And then trying to get customers to, talk about your product and be happy with it. So, stuff like that still worries me a little bit. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's definitely an uphill journey, especially with the way social media is. If you're a firearms company at all, if you're promoting guns or any of that stuff, you're screwed as it is.
You are.
And it's like, I keep hearing this, like, oh, well, we hired this kid out of college, hey, great. They've probably learned a lot of great stuff. But the problem is all that stuff that they were taught in college doesn't do a dang thing. You can't run ads. You can't run all the things that you could run with like a car or, a tent, or even something else in the hunting industry that they could push, fishing. Fishing's a really good one where I could probably imagine your guys' side. You've got a hunting side, shooting side, and then the fishing side. Right. And how much better you can see the fishing side do on social media and stuff.
You can. Yeah, it's pretty active. And, you look at the seasonality of fishing and, the regionality of fishing, and so there's ways that you can kind of boil it down. And to your point, yeah, I think I once heard Matt Dury from Dury Outdoors talk about perspective, right? And he said the best motivator of perspective is experience. And I think that, that's something that as you look at you and I, even though we're younger, relatively speaking, in this industry and the positions that we're in, we've had a good bit of experience, 15 years now. And the thing with the life cycle or the annual cycle of products in this industry is that you're going to go through a full year of a business cycle or a full calendar year to equal a business cycle. So it's not like, we can learn this lesson week to week to week. A lot of times, you make that mistake and it takes a year to recoup it or to reposition and try to act on it again. So in this industry, experience is really important to the point of you talking about a fresh kid, well-motivated, very intelligent, coming out of college. You got to earn your stripes in this industry, and experience is, probably the best way to do that, when it comes to any type of lesson in this industry, manufacturing, sales, marketing, or otherwise.
Right. And you got to know who you're talking to,
Yep.
That's the other thing is it's like so many of these companies, they hire so many people that have no idea what the product, number one, and who they're trying to market it to. Right. Number two, it's like, okay, let's go out and market a new game call, a duck call. It's like, okay, I don't know anything about duck hunting. All I know is that we can run this, this, and this. And that's the other hard thing is kind of coming back to that point. You got to have somebody that's super passionate about it and knowledgeable to be able to talk about that. And I can only imagine how much, like OSG and stuff, to find the people to fit those, those avenues or those venues.
Yeah, it can be pretty tough. And, I would say the other aspect of it too is, you look at the dynamics of our business, and I spoke to how we're evolving, and, we're a giant media company. Don't get me wrong, probably the largest in the industry, if not top 2, 3. And, most of our brands are very traditionally founded in regards to the medium. So by that, I mean publication or linear television. And, that outdoor production has evolved, and now we have digital deliveries from an episodic aspect, and then we have it from just more of a streaming aspect where it's more, daily content on the fly, with YouTube type deliveries. But when we start looking at filling some of these holes, when we have a guy like, let's say, a Gordon Whittington at North American Whitetail that just retired after 36 and a half years of being the editor-in-chief at North American Whitetail last year, it's hard to go out and find a young individual that, one, has been trained from an educational sense in, the grammatical skill set and the editorial skill set from a publication-based aspect. And then 2, with the kind of experience that you and I are talking about here within the industry. And then, we're in the middle of trying to evolve these true brands into a brand, not just a publication, both in the mind of the audience and then also our own employees sometimes. So you need to have somebody that is well-rounded enough, has been trained in the publication edit skill set, and then, has some experience in the industry and can, lead and evolve a brand into the next generation of content. So to your point, it can be very tough sometimes when it comes to us filling some of those holes. And I'll tell you, the last 2 years, 3 years, I've done a good bit of that because we kind of hit that retirement age of the initial layer of a lot of these brands. And we've had 3 or 4 folks that have retired and have moved on, and we've had to fill those boots. And man, it's been pretty difficult out there in the marketplace. And I'm not trying to pick on my generation or any of them younger, but the other thing is work ethic. And these people, on top of having to check those other 4 boxes, man, you have got to work hard. And that just as well as I do. You earn your stripes in this industry by putting in the extra time and going and doing the things that nobody else wants to do. And, retail events or media events, or, just spending time with a dealer that maybe you don't know from Adam. And it might be sitting down at the table with him and his family, or, who knows what it is, but that's what really allows for you to grow in this industry. And, having the motivation and the intestinal fortitude to put in that extra time and effort, it's hard to find, man. It really is.
Yeah. And that's another big thing that people are going to kind of start seeing, I think, is after those older people start sectioning out, what is the new look going to be? Mm-hmm. Is there going to be a completely new look to the aspect of the brand and everything else? Because now everybody coming into it understands, like, hey, this was great, back in the old days, or back even 10 or 15 years ago, but now the evolution of everything, mm-hmm. and kind of bringing up Hook and Barrel, what they did right was they made it more of a lifestyle, not necessarily just talking about a hunt thing, but, it's kind of going from that, hey, me and my buddies went on a hunt, to the whole lifestyle of it. Hey, mm-hmm. we showed up, we cooked this, we camped in this, it's kind of taking that entire envelope or that entire umbrella and completely changing it in this new thing. And actually it's kind of fun because you're not just talking about one thing, you're spreading it out over multiple aspects. And I think you guys have done a good job with that, because now you're not just talking about bows, you're kind of including everything else. And guess what? That brings in more people wanting to advertise with you, right? Because they're like, oh, shit, my stuff's on that show. Now I want to be, supporting that show and everything else, right?
For sure. Yeah. I've seen that. So I took on the publishing role just a little over 3 years ago at North American Whitetail, Gundog, and Wildfowl, those 3 brands, and worked in the associate publisher's role for a couple years prior to that. And, I really saw a transition in that first 6 to 12 months as I was trying to get my feet into, what was, for better or worse, a traditionally minded business. And you look at how we had really in each one of those brands had built ourselves to service a very niche marketplace. And we focused real hardcore on the hardcore elements of that niche marketplace's desires, And then as you saw digital and social, which it was way ahead of us. And I'll be very honest and transparent in saying that we're behind the curve at each of those brands, just due to the nature of the business model. And a lot of our competitors are the same way. But we were behind the curve in developing that digital social model. But as you looked at it and said, all right, with each of my teams, how do we shape our brands, from a content delivery, without getting out of control and service, our audience 365 days a year. And then that's where you see that, that influence of trying to shape that content around the lifestyle. And let's face it, and you can probably speak to this, dude, you're marketing every day with all kinds of companies, and, you want that consumer to affiliate and attach to you in a lifestyle manner, because you want to consume their time. You want them to think about brand X or brand Y or brand Z every day. You don't want them getting away from you and, going to spend time with a competitor in most cases. So you're trying to make sure that you're servicing the content. To be honest with you, the consumer is consuming content in that fashion, and that goes back to that iPhone again, where we used to just have 10 issues, 8, 12 issues a year, and maybe a TV show once a week for 13 weeks of the year to influence somebody. Now they can get on and they can engage with you socially on Instagram or Facebook, watch what you're doing from a production aspect on YouTube, read what you're doing if you have a publication in some regards, or if you have e-newsletter deliveries, or if you have digital content deliveries. They want to stay entertained and they want to stay engaged with you. And so, when it comes to servicing that marketplace, back to your point, man, you're trying to build a lifestyle and really play off that fear of missing out or FOMO type mentality, and make sure that you're, top of mind with them day in and day out.
Yeah. And I keep getting that from one of my clients, Boring Rifles. We kind of went into it and we did everything a little bit different. Everybody looks at it like Boring Rifles. And I'll admit, when he first came to me with this business plan, I'm like, Boring Rifles, really? And then he came up with all these crazy ass names for stuff, and I'm like, all right, you know what? We're friends. I'll roll with you. We're gonna roll deep, and we're gonna have a good time, and we'll just see how it works out. Guess what? It was one of the best things we ever did, because now everybody that messages me and stuff like, dude, we watch your stuff, we love your stuff. They want to be part of it. They just want a hat or a shirt. And that's part of owning or branding, and there's a lot of marketing people in this industry. I don't see them kind of, in essence, owning the company as well, and
Right.
and I don't mean by buying into the company, but taking the aspect of, hey, ownership, like ownership
Right.
in the marketing, ownership in the branding, because you create that, right? And that's been a big problem. I've created some brands for some companies, and then they're like, oh, thanks, goodbye. And then a year later, they call me, they're like, hey, what's wrong? It isn't working anymore. Or it's
right.
As soon as we took it back over, it's not working. I'm like, because that's just one of the steps, right? That's just one of the steps. You've got to interact with people. You can't just post shit and put it out there. You've got to have people constantly on there talking to people and creating those that stuff. And I've had multiple people buy rifles, and they come back and they're like, dude, you just treated us awesome. We want to support you. You took care of us. And I think that's more of a brand than most people look at. Most people look at a brand and they're like, oh, that's just your logo, or it's just your wording or whatever else. And a brand is more encompassing, right?
Yeah, 100%. You look at the average buy in our industry, and if you're talking about a firearm, or you're talking about a suppressor or an optic, you're not talking about a $5 object. You're talking about something that they're going to put some serious consideration into financially when they go to the counter. And when it comes to that, people just really want to know that when they lay that check down, or they lay that cash down, or they run that card, that they're being thought of, they're being appreciated for spending their money in that way. And I think some of it comes back to that lifestyle conversation that we're having, that, they want to be a part of something. They want to stand for something. And, that's one of the positive and negative aspects of social media today, because we probably waste way too much time on social media talking to, defending our position or affiliation in some cases. But is that people want to be a part of something, so you give them something to believe in. They want you to know what they're doing. They're trying to tell you who they are. They're trying to show you who they are by investing in a certain kind of rifle or a certain kind of camo or apparel or optic, that in some ways, a lot of ways, they're identifying themselves by making that purchase. So to have somebody turn around and say, hey, thank you for your business. And, oh, by the way, let me give you a little more information, or let's, more or less become friends in some regards, and let's engage from time to time. And let me tell you about what we're doing next, or what new products coming down the pipe, so it's an important aspect of what you do when it comes to brand building today, especially probably more so than ever.
Yeah, and I think, that was one thing I learned at Remington was they talked a lot of great things, but a lot of it was never really, put into effect. But,
Yeah.
How much your friends actually, you taking care of a person and then that person telling all of his friends about the great time he had, because that one person can affect a whole lot of purchases around them. And then, it's just like that cascading effect to where then they go around with their friends and then they go around with their friends. But as soon as you piss off one person or a few different people with the way you do things, it kind of goes around. Now, I've seen a couple different ways. There's a couple things out there that pretty much or companies out there that I've seen on social media that pretty much tell people F off if they don't like it, blah, blah, blah. Hey, sometimes it works. Some people really like that aspect. They're like, hey, they're not bullshitting us. We know they're truthful and they do their thing. But a lot of people don't like to get handled like that. And that's just the way human nature is, I guess, right?
No, you're 100%, man. And I think, one of the things I think we also learned at Remington was, the pride that comes with, legacy in companies and products, and the experience that not only their friends have had, but the experience that they remember as a child with dad and grandpa and, grandma, or, whatever firearm they owned, or, so it goes back to standing for something and aligning with something, people really, and I think that's a great part as Americans, like, hey, look, dude, that's who we are. We align with that red, white, and blue. The 4th of July that we have coming right around the corner, we're proud of where we've come from and who, fought for our rights and basically laid their life on the line for us, and so, we're out of nature. We're trained to be that way. If you're a U.S. citizen, and that's something that makes us who we are as a country and as a community. And so we continue to carry that on, sometimes a little too far. In some instances, we eat our own way too much or way too often here in this industry, especially, but nonetheless, overall, great group of community, great group of people. And, they want to matter, and they want to be able to believe in and invest in something that believes in them or that they can believe in as well. So, yep, there's a lot to that, man. There's definitely a lot to that.
Right. And it hurt, in a certain way of what happened to Remington, the oldest gun maker in the world, and so much pride, was behind Remington forever. And then the wrong people just got in charge and ruined a lot of it. And it became more about, and they hired the wrong people to run the businesses. And it wasn't about the quality. It wasn't about the product anymore. It became more about money and how much we can make and how much we can put out there. And that, in my opinion, is what ruined Remington. Remington had this phenomenal thing going, and then, we don't need to change anything. We're just going to sell it, how it is. We don't need to evolve. We don't need to do anything. And look where it got them, kind of coming back to the way we talked is the evolution behind a brand and everything else is it's got to roll with it. You're still going to have a few of the older people buying it, but how many of us know in hunting, after a certain age, a lot of people just don't hunt anymore. It's not feasible to go hunt because you can't get around, you can't do anything. So you're always, kind of coming back at full circle to try and bring new people into your brand and everything else. And kind of like what we were talking about right before we started the actual podcast was, hunting and, the way people were doing that. And what were you saying about people to Canada and the way that was all working?
Yeah. So, Canada shut down their border to U.S. citizens and everybody else, actually. There 2 years ago, first year of COVID. So it killed a lot of the hunting opportunity, and the majority of Canada's hunting industry, I shouldn't say the majority, I don't know the specific statistics there, but it's a significant number of Canada's hunting industry and licenses go to, not only U.S. residents, but other folks that, would be referred to as non-residents of Canada or aliens of Canada. And so when they shut down their border, there was a huge hurt on the economy up there in the outdoor segment and the hunting segment. And, it was pretty tough. So tough that, I was just up bear hunting a couple weeks ago in Saskatchewan, and I got a chance to talk with Cody Robbins there, the guy that was hunting with, the guy that has a TV show there on the Outdoor Channel called Live to Hunt. And him and his wife and business partner Richie Casement have started a bear hunting outfit in the spring and into the summer, aside from what they're doing. And good folks, man, just grinding it out, trying to live in the industry and chasing their passion and dreams. And but talking to them, Cody brought up the fact, I asked him a question. We were talking just about how the border had affected things. I said, Cody, how much turnover did you have up here, in the outfitting business? Because the outfitters actually have to earn or purchase their permits from the government. They apply, get accepted, they purchase it, and then they basically have an allocation of ground that they can hunt on. If it's not privately owned, there's a lot of public ground up there, Queen's ground, Royal ground, that they have access to outfit on. And he said, man, we had such a large turnover of outfitters because that was the livelihood of so many men. And when you cut their knees out from underneath of them and they've got a business leveraged, financially that they're going to pay for 10 to 20 years, over 10 to 20 years, and you come in and cut out 2 years of it, they can't keep that operating revenue rolling. And so they saw a lot of turnover up there. But on the south side of the border, what that's done for us in many of these states, I was telling you that I was waiting. I'd been waiting all afternoon. I started at number 2082, I think, in a queue for the Oregon Wildlife and Fish Department. And I was trying to buy a leftover non-resident deer tag for an area that I'm going to go out and hunt with a buddy in here in August. And I had been waiting all afternoon. So I was counting it down, and we started talking about non-resident applications here and how there weren't a whole lot of opportunities, or the opportunities that we had maybe 3-4 years ago pre-COVID, because there are a lot of men and women that weren't going north of the border now. So they were spending their money here in the States and going and seeking out and trying new opportunities from a non-resident aspect in states like Kansas and Oregon and North Dakota and South Dakota. And, it's really kind of changed our non-resident opportunities, and in some states, resident opportunities as well. But I guess to illustrate it, I would use the example of Kansas. Kansas last year was first time I didn't draw a Kansas tag for whitetail deer in quite some time. And I thought it was crazy. It'd been 4 years. I'd drawn that thing in a row, no problems. It was just an archery tag. I wasn't trying to get a firearms tag. And did some research after they released all their numbers on draw statistics, and they had a 27% increase in non-resident applicants from the year prior. And everything that I've heard so far this year, now I did draw that tag this year, but everything I've heard this year is that increase held, and maybe even grew some again this year. So I think until you see Canada has opened their borders back up, but they're still requiring a vaccination to get across the border to date. And I'd say until they lift that vaccination, I probably still a lot of folks that aren't going to cross that border. I just talked to the guy in Kansas yesterday. I was out. We've been filming for a network piece of content that they're going to release here in Q3 and Q4. And we did a bunch of filming on our deer lease there in North Central Kansas. And the owner of that lease was saying, yeah, I'm one of those guys, man. I'm just not interested in getting it. And, you respect that if that's what he wants to do, but there's a lot of guys and gals like him too, so I'd say Canada probably still will be hurt by that fact until they lift that requirement as well.
Yeah. And that's crazy, as the average guy, not really, putting all that into it. I keep hearing a lot about how hunters are shrinking, there's not as many hunters as there was. There's not, but I don't, maybe it's because now apps like Go Hunt and different things have kind of really opened everybody's eyes as to what they can go out there and put in for. And everybody I talk to, like myself, I put in for multiple states. I know a lot of people put in for multiple states. So in your opinion, is the hunting side of things actually growing that much? Or is it just now more people are understanding that they can go hunt so many different places?
Well, I think there's probably 3 or 4, there may be even more than that factors, but let's call them major factors. So let's talk about one, COVID. So COVID, until COVID, we were kind of seeing a slightly decreasing line of hunter participation. We continue to see it. I think we're down around 11 million, maybe slightly higher than, between 11 and 13 million with the last surveys that were done. And then COVID hit. And I think everything I've heard and read, we've jumped back up into that 20% increase range, maybe not quite 15% on average across the country. So a lot of people are talking about a 13 to 15 million number, somewhere in that range, but I've not seen that physically. And I'm not for sure when the NSSF does their survey again, but it's coming up here pretty quick, the outdoor survey, hunter participation survey. And I think it's every 5 years that is done. And so we'll pick up that survey as soon as it's done here. And that will tell us a lot about the last 5 years where we've experienced COVID. And, I'm starting to hear some folks say that you're seeing some fall off again now that everything has opened back up, because you have little league sports and athletics, and you have community events, and you have all these things. Now throw in the influx of inflation and gas prices. And, my personal opinion is I think a lot of these folks that came back into, because most of the statistics I've seen, the increase was largely re-entrants, folks that had hunted before, not as much new entrants, but re-entrants, folks that had been exposed to it earlier in life, just had life happen with children or parents, or whichever way you want to look at it dynamically. And they had to walk away from hunting for a time period, but COVID basically opened their calendar up and they had an opportunity to get back out and do it. And so personally, I think you're going to see some of that romance probably fall off again over, this fall and next fall, if things, stay consistent with COVID and how it, influences the country. But, I would love to hear somebody say, oh, we're on a gradual 2% to 5% increase of hunters year over year, and it's going to be that way for the next 10 years. But realistically, I don't think it's going to be. I think we're probably going to be flat at best. And, if you and I do our part as content generators and marketers, hopefully we can drive that participation level up. But it's probably going to stay flat or slightly increase if I had to guess from here on out. And that's just my opinion.
I've got kind of a philosophy, and I call it the Insta Hunter. And what I mean by the Insta Hunter is so many people have seen these people become famous. Instagram, social media, and everything else has influenced so many people to, it's so easy. These guys just go out and they shoot a big deer, and we all see it, right?
Right.
And you didn't see how much time that guy or that gal spent away from their family. All you saw was a picture of them hunting and a picture of them killing something. You didn't see everything in between, right? And I think that's kind of why I call it the Insta Hunter mentality, is everybody thinks it's just so easy to do it. And I saw so many people this last year. It took me almost to the very last day to shoot the deer that I wanted, because I wasn't just going to settle, right? I didn't want to shoot anything. There was a whole lot of 2 points. It was a crazy year. It snowed during this early hunt in September that I was on, and the deer didn't know what the hell was going on. And all of a sudden they started rutting in September. And they're like, because it completely threw them off. All these 2 points, all these deer came out of nowhere, and they just wiped them out. Every 2 point I saw was dead. Everything was dead. And that kind of sucks, because I think a lot of them probably weren't hunting for, horns, which is a good thing. I'm not saying that's bad.
Right.
But then you just killed all the genetics for the next how many years out of that area, because you killed everything out of it. You know what I mean? And that's kind of the thing, is I think along with the COVID and along with inflation, people are starting to understand, hey, I don't need to go kill a cow. I can go kill a deer. I can go kill an elk. I can go kill something else, put it in the freezer, and I got food, which is good. That's why a lot of us hunt anyway. And the big racks and everything else are just fun in the meantime. But I think a lot of the Instagram and social media stuff has influenced a lot of people to kind of get back into it, and they want to have their 10 minutes of fame on social media when they shoot something big, and that's just kind of how it is. I don't know.
Big show and tell session for sure. But you got to be really careful. That's one of the things that, as a content generator, and it's different for a guy like yourself or a guy like me or some of the guys that I work with versus, the everyday average Joe that's out here and like, hey, he went out and hunted for the first time in 5 years. He killed a deer. He's proud of it. I'm glad he's proud of it. And I hope he brings a few more people with him and they at least get a taste of it and they understand. And I hope they get to eat and consume some of that venison. And if nothing else, they have an understanding of why we do what we do as very passionate subjects in the field, but the reality is that there's a lot of false perception. You're right. And that can be built at times. And you got to be really careful that, as a content generator, you're not just showing surface level stuff, that you're explaining and saying, hey, disclaimer, I put it in 35 days in the field this year, or on the mountain, in the woods, wherever it was, before I got this opportunity. And, this is the kind of deer I was after. And you know what, if you're one of those people that 5-year-old mature animal is not what you're looking for, 180 inches or 200 inches or 400 inches as an elk, and you just want to go out and shoot a meat bull and you're successful at doing it, then great. Enjoy that too. We're happy for you, but do understand that regardless of how you're going to do it, you're going to put in some time and effort, and you're going to, probably have some trials and tribulations in going through it. And you hope that there's not too much of a false perception being built around the concept of what kind of input goes into being a successful hunter in regards to filling a tag. There's a lot of other ways to measure being a successful hunter. And, as I start to explain these, sometimes some of my best buddies will say, you're just a bad hunter. But there are, the adventure, the time, the fellowship that you're spending out there with people, the things you're learning, the ways in which you're improving your health in some regards. There's so much that goes into hunting that goes so far beyond the crack of that trigger, whether it be the release for your archery setup, or the actual trigger that's on your rifle or shotgun, and that deer or bird or whatever it is falling to the ground, and you going and picking or retrieving that animal up. There's so much more to hunting than that. That's 2% of the overall 100% that goes into it. So it's I hope people do a better job of explaining that if they haven't already.
Right. And I think, recently with, publications and different things, they've been working a lot more on the how to prep an animal, how to cook an animal, right. Watching some of that, and some of that super, we've all thought there was one way to skin a cat. Right. And then we see all these different ways to do backstrap and tenderloins and everything else. Now you're like, oh, all right, now I want to go try that. Last year was the first year I ever shot a cow elk. It just never floated my boat to go shoot a cow elk. I didn't want one. But I took one of the guys that works for me. He'd never shot an elk or deer or anything. And I'm like, you know what? I got these tags. Let's just go use them. We went out. We had a good time, because that was one of the number one things that I loved about getting in hunting, was spending time with friends, hanging out, the camaraderie, all that kind of stuff. And we went out. I taught him, some of the tips and tricks of it. I saw the elk a whole bunch of times before he actually got to come out and do it. And I didn't shoot him. I'm like, I'll wait till he comes out and shoots it. And then I went and bought everything that I needed to package it. So I went and bought big freaking grinders, and I bought the packaging, and I bought everything. And we sat and we did ground burger and stuff out of that elk. And now we cook it. And dude, it's one of the best freaking things ever. Because we went through and we figured all that stuff out, but I would have never figured any of that stuff out without articles and other things to read. It's so easy to pick up your phone now and go, hey, Siri, how the hell do I cut up an elk or something like that? Because I've heard stories about that recently. I've heard probably 6 or 7 different stories. And one of them was a kid that I knew, never hunted in his life, took his car up the side of a mountain somewhere and parked it as far as he could go, went in and shot an elk. And then he went, oh shit. Now what do I do?
Now
and
what
luckily
do?
He had service, and he Googled how to freaking cut up an elk, and he cut up the elk off of Google and everything else. And it's made it super simple. For the longest time, if you didn't know how to hunt, you were an idiot. You weren't a man.
Right.
You weren't that person that anybody wanted to hang out with. And it's like, like this kid, his dad died, quite a few years ago, and he just never got anyone to take him and spend that time and teach him. And that's kind of one of the things that I've kind of had fun with as of the last probably 5 or 10 years, was actually getting other people involved in hunting and showing them how much fun it is, and then having the stories. Because every time I see a lot of these people like, hey, you remember when we did that? You remember when we did that?
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's just as much fun as, actually me going out and shooting something and seeing somebody else partake in it, right?
That's exactly right, man. The process of handing off, our lifestyle, it's a big deal, and it's neat, and it's very rewarding. And, when, like you said, 5 years down the road, you run across that kid that was from, your local gym or your local bow shop or, your church. And he says, man, I had a great time. And he said, I was just telling my buddy the other day about that time we went on that deer hunt, or we went on that turkey hunt, or you took me white bass fishing. And you know, it's pretty neat to hear that it matters for that long when it comes around. And, you know, let's face it, I'm not as good about it as I need to be. I should be better about it, but being an advocate for our lifestyle and sharing it, you know, and passing it on to folks outside of just your household, you know, it's a big deal just to get a child to commit to going out and hunting and trying to pass it off without, you know, being overwhelming to them, but having the opportunity to go out and share it with people outside of your household. And, you know, it carries it that much further. And like we talked about earlier, there aren't that many of us anyway. And, you know, it'd be great to find a way to preserve and pass on this lifestyle and what we do in any way, even if it's through a meal, you know, or the process of creating a meal. It's a big deal. And it's, you know, what's the old cliche saying? Give a person a fish, they'll eat for a day, teach a person to fish, they'll eat for a lifetime. Something along those lines. And so, you know, it's pretty darn neat. Definitely.
Yeah, one of the big things is we as hunters bitch and complain. We're like, man, there's just too many people on the hill. Yeah. Every time I go, there's orange, there's this, there's that. And you know what? Yeah. At some point, are you somebody that's out there for conservation, or you're out there for your own personal thing, you know? Mm-hmm. And there's got to be a happy medium. Yeah, I mean, we're all going to be irritated. Like, you see a deer, you plan it, you're going to go in there, and you're going to make a great stalk, and you show up, and there's people everywhere. Like, right. You know, it blew it. But like this year, we had a guy shot. He had never really shot, you could tell, wounded a deer. And I was in a different area, and I kind of watched the whole thing go down. And instead of continuing hunting, I walked over there, and I'm like, "Hey, man, how can I help you?" Because you could tell he didn't know what the hell was going on. Right. I'm like, let's track this deer. Let's find the blood. Let's do everything. And I think after we kind of, you know, went through all the situations, I think he just like skimmed it and took some of the skin off and maybe a teeny bit of blood right there. And that was it. Because he was shooting a nozzler, 28 nozzler. So if he really hit it, there probably would have been a good blood trail. But, you know, and educating him with that. I'm like, hey, this is what you look for when you're tracking, you know, that kind of stuff. And he was super, you know, thankful. He's like, man, no one would ever spend the time to do this with me, and I appreciate that. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but as we as hunters, you know, spent more time helping each other. We've had this conversation a million times.
Right.
Man, if we quit fighting each other, imagine the freaking stuff we could get done. You know, look at the liberals. They're all on the same side, and look at all the shit they're getting done because they don't fight amongst themselves. They've got an agenda and they want to get it done, but we as hunters freaking fight each other tooth and nail all the damn time. You know what I mean?
We do. We definitely have the ability to eat our own at times. And, you know, speaking to that whole thought process, you know, we've just seen in the last hour, or the last 24 hours, I'm sorry, that it's been proposed. There's been a proposal placed to repeal Pittman Robinson, right? And I think you're about to see us as hunters really unite around a situation like that. You know, that's an 11% excise tax that comes from all the investment that we have as an industry in hunting and archery or bow hunting goods that is given directly back to conservation in so many ways. But you know, that's something that we've taken on as a community and said, hey, we're willing to invest 11% of what we spend back into preserving the opportunity to hunt and conservation and access and all these things. And, you know, it came up, I think we worked most of the day yesterday. I hopped in the truck about 6:55 and I was getting gas just 30 minutes down the road. And I just, you know, was wasting some time there at the gas pump and hit Instagram and went through the stories real quick. And it was like, boom, 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 boom. Everybody was talking about the potential or proposed repeal of Pittman Robinson. And so, you know, it's always neat when you see our community all of a sudden go, oh, I don't care if you're shooting an 80-pound bow or a mechanical broadhead or, let's say like an optic, a rifle optic with some type of a range finding device in it, or, you know, whatever we can find to bicker about among each other and establish who's more of a man or a hunter within our own community. It all goes out the window. And when you see it all go out the window for once and we stand together as a community and try to defend or advocate or work together to achieve something, man, we're pretty powerful. And, you know, you talk about just introducing people to the outdoor lifestyle or the hunting lifestyle or the fishing lifestyle. Just think, let's say we have 13 million hunters, right? if each one of us said, all right, this year we're going to introduce one new person. I'm going to take them just one afternoon, take them out on one hunt and say, hey, I want to take you out on a hunt. I want to show you what I do. I want to share my lifestyle with you. That turns into 26 million real quick. If each one of us only took one person and did that, that's a pretty big number. That's a significant increase, and all of a sudden you sold 13 million more hunting licenses for the year. And so, it sounds very simple, and I've heard people, propose that or pitch that in different tactics before. But when you boil it down, even if we got half those people, at 7.5, that'd be a huge help to our community and people understanding what we do and why we do it. So, I commend anybody that's taking the time to invest just a little bit of their time, and folks that are trying to break down the barrier. That's one of the things that I always, even though they might be a competitor, I pat the backs of the Meat Eater crew, because, they found a way to kind of build a bridge with a lot of mainstream folks that maybe didn't understand hunting, and they're trying to open that door and advocate and create content that, is not so difficult and dynamic to understand. It's very fundamental, basic level stuff that at least provides people an opportunity to have a conversation about what we do. And so,
and I see a lot of negative about those guys too. Like, oh, they loved Obama. They did this, they did that, and whatever they voted, it is what it is. But what they are doing for the hunting community itself is what I pay attention to, right?
Exactly.
And maybe they haven't done everything right. I know in my life I haven't. Lord bless me, I haven't done everything right either. And a lot of people probably don't agree with a lot of stuff I say or do either. But that's not the point in the hunting aspect. And they are doing a phenomenal job in the hunting, and they're making it fun to watch. And one of the big things that I commend those guys with, and one of the things that I try to educate people with long range shooting, is understanding the shots that you can take as a person.
Right.
And I've seen him not shoot a lot of things because it wasn't right. It didn't feel right. And so many people end up wounding and doing so many different things, especially in the long range game. We're stretching it further and further and further and further to understanding ballistics and what your rifle can do, and especially what you can do as a shooter and hunter, right?
Yep.
And I've said that a million times. What you can do on a piece of steel at 1,000 is different than when you get buck fever and you're super excited and that deer standing there, and it's totally different. You've got so many variables that come into that, and shooting a piece of steel, you're like, if I miss, I miss.
Yep.
If you shoot at a deer and you miss and you wound the shit out of it, I know I have a problem sleeping at night if I can't find it. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things. And that's the educational part of what I'm trying to do with long range tactics is what you can do as a shooter. Everybody considers a long range shot a different range. Like, I've asked it 100 different times, 1,000 different ways. What is long range to you? And everybody has a different answer, and then what do I say? What is ELR? What's extended long range? And to one person it might be a mile, to one person it might be 800 yards, because they're like, man, who can even shoot that far?
Right. Yeah.
So that all comes into effect with that stuff too. And I don't know how that affects, what you're doing and everything else, but
in a huge way, man. And, as a, a brand, and I can speak specifically to this, we have that conversation come up quite often at North American Whitetail, not as much at Gundog and Wildfowl, of course, but at North American Whitetail quite often. And, the big craze 4 or 5 years ago was crossbows. And you saw the integration of very fast crossbows, high velocity, 400 feet per second or greater crossbows that, there were even marketing campaigns out there that said or implied that they shoot like a rifle. And that created an expectation within the consumer marketplace that, we tried to be very careful when we talk about it at North American Whitetail. And to your point, allow for people to understand that, there's things that happen to a bullet. If we're talking rifle long range, there's things that, can play influence on that bullet environmentally or from a weather aspect. It's the same thing applies to an arrow or a bolt coming out of a crossbow. And the one thing that none of us can account for is what that ammo does from the time that sear engages to the point at which that projectile, whatever it is, arrow or otherwise, impacts that animal. And it's, it's amplified with archery tackle, because it's going 300 feet per second to 400 feet per second versus a rifle at 2,500 plus. It can be completely different, but it's amplified with archery equipment. And so, we're always very careful to say, yes, first of all, understand yourself. You have to know what your own limitations are. You have to, but out of respect for those animals that you're pursuing, nobody wants to hit an animal in the top of the back and, open a wound that they potentially end up getting infected and then die from, in the winter when times are hard and nutrition's low. But at the same time, nobody wants to wound an animal fatally and watch them cripple away and then never find them in some cases either, So, just know who you are, know what you're capable of with your weapon that you're using at that point in time. And then also, think about what's going on with that animal. Is that animal giving you a quarterway shot? Is he giving you a broadside shot, or is his front shoulder turned into you and it's quartering too? And that you're using an arrow, not a 180-degree bullet rolling at 100 or 2,800 feet per second. Understand what's going to go on and how to set up what you can do, and that can boil all the way down to your hunt setup. If you're hunting from a stand, where you're creating that shooting lane and how you're attracting that deer or what they're attracted to as they're coming through that shooting lane. So there's a lot of things that you can do strategically, but on the surface, know your weapon, know that animals can do a lot between sear engagement and when that projectile makes contact. And that's one thing that, thankfully, when I came into the fold here at North American Whitetail, we have some great team members and, they're very conscious of and try to make sure that they're advocating for when it comes to any type of a long range or I'll just say extended range shot.
Yeah, and that's huge. I mean, as a hunter, we need to know what our limitations are 100%. That's why, it's always been like that. The grandpa's gun where you take out and shoot at a pie plate. Hits pie plate, we're perfect, we're good. And that needs to be kind of put away. The evolution of everything that doesn't mean anything anymore. And I think a lot of people are doing great jobs. There's a lot of places to do, but there's still that out there. And until everybody understands that and kind of evolves and comes full circle, I think our jobs are always still needed. What I mean?
Yeah, there's job security. And actually, to speak to that, we've got a brand new season of North American Whitetail TV hitting Sportsman's channel and Outdoor channel this week. And our first hunt was actually me in Wyoming archery hunting last year. And I had a velvet whitetail come in, shot him at 26 yards. He was on alert a little bit. And he dropped about 8 to 9 inches. And you can see, we actually go through, that's our tech segment for the show. We talk through how I spined that deer, and it shook me. And it shook my confidence for a good time period. And I never got to see that footage until we started editing the episode in December. And I was rolling through and I just had my pointer on the screen, and we went through 5 frames. And now we film in 23.9 frames per second. So that means that video camera is taking a picture, taking 23.9 pictures per second to build that video footage. So in 5 frames, that deer dropped between 8 and 9 inches at 26 yards. And I went from hitting that deer center mass, which would be center lung, low lung, to hitting that deer in the spine. And that was in less than a half second that he achieved that at 26 yards. So to speak to what we're talking about here, that's a great visual aspect or execution of, again, like, you never know what that animal is capable of at that point in time. And I'll tell you, man, like we've talked about already, you want to talk about shaking you, man, that worked me over for the majority of the season last year, and had to fight through it pretty hard.
Yeah, when shit gets in your head, it is so hard to get rid of it. The confidence factor. Confidence is everything when you're going in stuff like that and making those shots. That's, there's still a lot of situations I shoot all the time, but it's like I still lack a lot of confidence when it comes to an animal, because you just you don't want to screw up, and you don't want to do that, because you don't want to see. I have this kid that I hunt with, and he shot an elk with an arrow. It went down, and it took him a lot of years to draw this tag, and it went down, and it was went down through some trees. He went down to find it, and he could never find it. Couldn't find the arrow, couldn't find anything. He spent the next 4 or 5 days of his hunt looking for that one elk, and he goes, I can't shoot another elk.
Right.
He goes, I can't do it. He goes, I can't. And awesome for him. You wait that long, and you can't find the elk, and it's got to be either dead somewhere or it's long gone, and he just couldn't bring himself to to go shoot another one. And kudos to him.
Kudos.
we could all be like that, but but I get it. He still talks about that. He goes, man, it still makes me sick to this day. And I think that's a true hunter. It's just someone that gives a shit about that kind of stuff.
Oh, for sure, man. And I commend him. I don't know the guy, but I commend him. And I'll tell you, like, you can beat yourself up. And, now that I do this a lot more frequent, I used to hunt a lot as an individual, as was. It's what I did. And now I do it even more, which my wife shakes her head at. And I can call it work now. And so she laughs pretty hard when that brings up and probably rolls her eyes a little bit. But one of the conveniences we have is that we have a video camera over our shoulder most of the time because we're filming for the show. So we get to see what goes wrong a lot. Now, the average guy that's out there hunting, he doesn't have that. So you have a situation like that where an elk takes an arrow and he runs down the mountain. Elk are beastly animals, and it's amazing what they can live through, especially when it comes to archery tackle and whitetail deer for that matter. You're hunting a whitetail deer in November when he's, pumped full of testosterone and looking for that event that he only gets to experience for 14 days of the year. It takes a lot to stop him in some cases. And so you make a marginal shot that, he may or may not live through. And unless you see where that shot hits, that a lot of times you don't know. So I commend your buddy there for going on ahead and saying more or less my tag's filled. But you'd be surprised how many times animals live through it too. But you always, just like he did the respectful thing. He took 4 to 5 days. He looked for that animal and didn't find him, unfortunately. So I'm sure in his gut he had a feeling that that probably motivated that decision that he made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and everybody asks me. I always get that question. If I'm going elk hunting, moose hunting, what do I use? Well, what's the biggest bullet you can shoot?
Yep.
They're tough sons of bitches, man.
They are.
I've seen a lot of elk run away from stuff they shouldn't run away from, and they're just they're tough. That's all there is to it. So shoot the biggest gun you can shoot. Get the most knockdown, and you're going after one of them.
Yep.
But so anyway, before I let you go, how do people find out everything that you're doing?
So I'm on Instagram, on Facebook. Personally, if you guys want to try to catch up with me, I'm not as good as I should be about keeping social full. We stay pretty busy here between the magazines and everything we got going on digitally, socially, and on the TV show. But North American Whitetail is one of the brands that I manage. You can check us out on Facebook, Instagram. We have our Facebook page, our website. And then we've just recently started a YouTube page. We're trying to populate that right now. We've got some content out there, but we've got a heck of a lot more to come. Gundog, we have Instagram, Facebook. That's Gundog Magazine is where you're going to see it. And that's a great brand, another legacy brand that celebrated 40 last year. NAW celebrating 40 years this year. We have a brand new digital platform there that we've developed with exclusive content for our subscribers to the magazine that has our very elaborate library of gun dog training series that's been very popular for a lot of years. And, we have a highly engaged audience there on Instagram, especially, that we interact with daily. And, who doesn't love a dog, especially a hunting dog? But you can check us out on those platforms. And then Wildfowl, no TV show there yet. I'll say, but we do have the magazine. It's been around again for almost 4 decades and highly engaged Instagram and Facebook. But we also have a podcast there that we started this last year. So Skip and Nathan, our 2 editorial leads there at Wildfire, are leading that. And we've got a special guest that appears quite often, Jim McConville, which is a national sales manager for us here at Outdoor Sportsman Group. And that guy alone is worth listening to a couple of those podcasts with. He's an awesome guy. Played football at Ohio State back in the 80s. And if you ask him about it, he'll tell you he played 4 years, 2 years without a helmet. And just a great walleye fisherman, a great waterfowl hunter, and, plenty going on. So check us out.
I'm going to unfollow his ass because I'm sick and tired of seeing all the walleye hunting.
Oh, my gosh.
Man.
Oh, gosh.
All the time he's just fishing. I'm like, you son of a bee. You're living the life, man.
He is.
You're having a good one. But I appreciate you, brother. Thank you. I think we had a great conversation today. And I'm kind of trying to do this with a podcast. There's a lot of, you can talk about long range so much, but bringing the other aspects into long range, understanding the industry itself and understanding, hunting and understanding the different aspects of long range hunting or long range shooting is all kind of there. So again, if any of you listening want to know any more about us, PM us, DM us. We're on social media, Long Range Tactics podcast. We've got the Long Range Tactics Facebook group. We're over 23,000 now. We're doing good. We're growing, and we truly appreciate it. One of our last sponsors, Bucked Up Energy, 20% off. Use code LR Tactics, all caps 20, and that'll get you 20% off anything over on Bucked Up. And they've got some great stuff. If you're kind of trying to get into shape before hunting, and maybe even, just trying to live a little bit better and healthier. So go check out their stuff. I appreciate you, Laden. I'm sure we'll probably have another one here soon, and hopefully we can work on some more projects here pretty soon.
Sounds great. I'm looking forward to it. It's always good to spend time with you, man. We need to do more of it. So thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Hey, thanks, brother.
All right. We'll see you.
Don't be afraid to pipe up.